Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here, coming at you guys with another weekly YouTuber recommendation and comic book review. Please excuse this background. I am getting ready to record my Wars trading card game video next, so this video isn't about the Wars card game, although if you haven't checked out my last two Thursday videos and your interest is piqued in the Wars trading card game, go check out those videos. I'm actually really proud of how they turned out. This is like one of the more niche things I've covered on my channel, so they haven't gotten a lot of interest, especially the second video, viewership really dropped off on it, but I don't really care. I'm really excited to be doing them for the people who like them. So there's one more Wars card game planned for the near future, which is coming out this Thursday, that will be on the Incursion booster packs. So go back, give those videos a little love. You never know, you might get a kick out of it. And if you don't, that's fine too. But of course, I'm not here to plug myself today. I'm here to plug one of you guys out there on YouTube. Today is going to be kind of a weirder one. I had a current YouTuber kind of lined up, but I actually haven't gotten my homework done. I don't have the comic book read yet. And I was looking back at my week and realized that I got distracted by a YouTuber from the distant past. So today's shout out is for a YouTube channel that is actually completely inactive. They used to have a couple thousand subscribers. Now they have like maybe less than I do, but they were, very active for about 6 months and then they dropped off. And I thought it might be kind of fun to do a look back because the YouTube community has existed in many different iterations over the years. The current crop of YouTubers out there right now that I'm really excited to be watching mostly started during the pandemic when they were stuck at home, is kind of a common theme I've seen from a lot of videos out there. It's built one of the biggest comic book communities I feel like I've seen on YouTube. And so it's really neat. And I'm excited to be a part of that community. But it got me thinking about when I hopped on YouTube and what kind of the influx of YouTubers was that I was really a part of when I first started. And for me, believe it or not, it was actually the launch of DC's New 52. There was a whole crop of channels that got up and running basically with the launch of the New 52 because there was such a clear jumping on point for DC. They completely revamped their line, for better or for worse, and places like tfaw.com made it very affordable to literally pick up all 52 books. So you had some channels reviewing everything. As a matter of fact, Tfaw's own YouTube channel did a whole series of videos about every single issue 1 that DC put out during the New 52 era. And then you had a lot of people just kind of grabbing up a bunch of books and talking about them, which caused them to spill into Marvel and Image and build up their channels from there. And that was very much the wave that I was a part of. And then there was one channel in particular that I always looked forward to and was a huge influence on me in the last year as I've kind of been finding my new YouTube voice. Because my channel was defunct for probably 7 years or so. And as I was coming back to YouTube, I was really trying to reestablish my voice. And so the channel I looked back on is the channel I want to talk a little bit about today, and that is Defiant Empire, which was a channel that existed separate of comic book reviews, but then when DC's New 52 launched, Andrew Cymek and Nug Nargang, sorry if I'm mispronouncing any names here, took over the channel and reviewed every single DC New 52 title from basically issues 1 through 6. Their plan was to review the first arc of every book, but of course, they weren't universally 6-issue arcs, and so they kind of got lost trying to figure out when they were going to break off. And over the 6 months that they did the reviews, I always looked forward to their videos because they were just fun personalities. They talked about every single book that was coming out from DC, and they always had that video up every single Wednesday with 13 new comic book reviews. It just became a wonderful Wednesday ritual. And if anyone ever wonders like where This Week in Batman comes from, like it basically is me trying to recapture the weekly ritual of watching Nug and Cymek reviewing the DC New 52. When I started a year ago, I tried reviewing DC Infinite Frontier and I only lasted a couple of months. The books got more expensive, which is kind of why I dropped off it. But at the same time, like, as they were ramping up, I have enough trouble just keeping up with the Batman books. It really is a pretty crazy, daunting task to think about. And it's cool that they maintained it for the 6 months that they did. It became pretty clear that, after they became more intermittent and eventually were only on a couple of times a year, that their fans were pretty upset because part of what was great about it was the regularity of it. And it's too bad that they got, some pushback at that point because, they had full-time jobs. Like Nug is an actor, Andrew Cymek, I think, is a director. If you ever want to see their work, Andrew Cymek did something called Dark Rising, which I've never seen it. I don't really know much about it. And then Nug appeared in one of the Cube movies, actually. I don't remember if it was Cube Zero or which one it was, but I remember sitting down and watching all of the Cube movies, and all of a sudden Nug was in it, and I was like, wait, what? But the point is, these are, working creative talents that somehow found a way to sit down, read 13 new DC books every single Tuesday night, and then get a video recorded, edited, and put up by end of day Wednesday, if I remember correctly, so that, you'd have something to come home and watch every Wednesday. It's pretty unsustainable if you think about it, and of course, that's why it's a dead channel now. Now, I questioned whether or not I should do this video because does it make sense to support a dead channel? I'm not sure, but it is a channel I'm very sentimental about, and I'll actually go back and watch some of their videos every once in a while, and I usually get sucked in and watch like a few weeks in a row just because I enjoyed their personalities and their take. And it was different than most other people because like they were DC fanboys, and everybody was pretty skeptical about the New 52, and they for the most part like ate it up. They didn't like the things they didn't like, but they really celebrated the things that they did like, and it was different than what a lot of other people were responding to at the time. One of the complaints I remember about the New 52 in the moment was that it was super sexist because you had Catwoman, Voodoo, Red Hood and the Outlaws. There were a handful of other titles where, like, there were complaints that the women were all objectified. A bunch of readers were upset about that, which is interesting because, like, now it's like the script is flipped. Now you have comic book creators yelling at readers when they like something that's like cheesecake, and Nug and Cymek love that stuff. And that was part of what was fun because I enjoyed cheesecake too, which actually dovetails nicely into today's review because I was going back, rewatching some of their old videos, and I remembered this particular book because that cheesecake factor, it kind of got written off at the time, but is actually a pretty interesting book. And now reading it for the first time based on Nug and Cymek's recommendation, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised by Voodoo. So one of the things about the DC New 52 was this was when the Wildstorm universe, created by Jim Lee, integrated fully into the DC universe, and there was a whole pocket of comic books based in that world. And they went about it in kind of a weird way. So like Voodoo is a member of Wildcats, to my understanding. They gave her her own title. The same thing with Grifter. Grifter got his own title. Not nearly as good as Voodoo, by the way. I read that recently as well, and I would not really recommend Grifter. But Wildcats didn't get a title. They just had sort of various characters from Wildcats. Hellspawn, who is a villain, appeared in Superman, and then also in Grifter and in Voodoo, I think? Now they're kind of blurring together, but I think he shows up somewhere in Voodoo as well. And the Demonite aliens from the Wildstorm universe showed up in all kinds of different titles, kind of implying this long-term invasion plan that would have presumably spread across all of the DC books at some point, but the storyline never really materialized, at least not to my knowledge. The whole thing was kind of a dud because the quality was up and down. It didn't build up to a Wildcats, and so it was kind of like, what is the point? And DC had, in my opinion, two really strong crossover titles that built up over the first 12 months, and they definitely ran with those. So you had the Rot storyline in Swamp Thing and Animal Man, and you had the Court of Owls in Batman, which, they got a ton of mileage out of in that first year. And so some of the Demonite plans just kind of fizzled out. On top of it, you had Jeff Johns building up Darkseid, which is, of course, an alien invasion force too. So at a certain point, all this stuff kind of gets muddled and something doesn't make the cut. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at this book on its own, but also in the context of some of that other stuff. So opening it up, first of all, if you like cheesecake, this book certainly has it. It's written by Ron Mars and illustrated by Sami Basri, whose work I do not know outside of Voodoo, but I mean, as you can see, you go for the kink factor pretty much right off the bat. So this book opens up with Voodoo as a stripper, and there are various detectives that are interested in Voodoo because they know she is not what she seems. And what you find out over the course of the book is that she's actually a horrific alien, although of course you wouldn't know it from when the detective goes home with her and pays her for sex, basically. Of course, he gets her home, and she turns into this hideous monster. And that's basically the end of the issue. Now, this works really well for me as someone who doesn't know anything about the Wildstorm universe, really. So, if you're a Wildstorm fan and you're upset about this portrayal of Voodoo, like, I get it. For me, it's basically going in blind and just seeing a character who's being investigated, and turns out she's an evil shapeshifter. Interesting character, and I was excited to find out what happened to her. And what you find out through the course of the book as it continues on is that this is not actually Voodoo. And this is one of the kind of crazier aspects of this book in the context of relaunching the Wildstorm universe and integrating it into DC. You spend the first 3 or 4 issues following someone who is not Voodoo. This person is actually a clone. The Demonites, who are these sort of blue monsters that you can see here, cloned the actual Voodoo and are using her to investigate the human race in anticipation of their invasion. And the real Voodoo has been captured by an organization that's like experimenting on her, and it's up to her to basically escape and take down this fake Voodoo. So all of this stuff sort of gets set up over the course of this first trade paperback. And while I don't usually review subsequent trade paperbacks in this, it's kind of hard not to talk about the whole thing because it only ran for 12 issues, and the culmination of this whole storyline actually does get wrapped up in volume 2, where you switch gears and you mostly follow the actual Voodoo and her quest to basically, expose the Demonites based on the fact that, they've been experimenting on humans and are secretly among us, preparing for invasion. And that's kind of where the book leaves off. She sort of has her revenge. She teams up with some Wildstorm team. I don't really remember even who they were, if I'm being honest with you. Wildstorm had a lot of different teams, I'm noticing. And overall, it was actually a really fun read. Oh, and the Blackhawks are in here too, that's right. The biggest complaint I have about this storyline is that, you're really getting this alien invasion from the sidelines. Oh, and there's Hellspawn, by the way. For the most part, she's really just fighting off lackeys of Hellspawn, and it never really goes much beyond that. Of course, she has the big fight with the clone of Voodoo, which is interesting, but that never quite gets resolved. And it just feels a little too pedestrian in terms of the greater story arc. Now, if this built up to something a little bit grander than just, blue jello monsters, I think there would be, more here to talk about. People might look back on it a little bit more fondly than they do. But unfortunately, we never got to that point. And, if you're comparing this to the ideas set off from the very first issue of Swamp Thing or Animal Man or, the Court of Owls and Batman, those had things that really hooked you from a villain standpoint. Whereas this, you're hooked with the Voodoo character and the fact that there's the clone out there. Great surprise. But from that, it's just like Independence Day, where it's like, okay, well, here's a generic alien invading force, and that's kind of it. And they don't even invade, so, you don't even get to see the Eiffel Tower get blown up or something like that. So as I said, after reading Voodoo, I actually swung back over to the Grifter storyline just to see if I could pick up more of the pieces. And, that's kind of the same thing, except with a really gruff, annoying protagonist. Did not like Grifter in the Grifter book. As much as I liked him in this Infinite Frontier iteration, the New 52 iteration is just kind of very cliche. It gets better when Rob Liefeld takes it over almost, because he's sort of over the top then, and it's ridiculous. Not good either, it's more just funny. But then the biggest crime of that book being the same thing, which is that they're just kind of fighting blue jello monsters that never really materialize into anything more epic or interesting than just generic alien invasion. I am giving the New 52 Wildstorm universe one more chance with Team 7 that is actually kind of a slog to get through. It's interesting in that it has Amanda Waller before she was in charge of the Suicide Squad, probably the most interesting idea that the book has. But beyond that, just, again, not really materializing into all that much. It's just kind of steeped in Wildstorm jargon that is disorienting and kills the momentum that the book does have. So sadly, despite their best efforts, Wildstorm and the New 52 and beyond really pretty much fizzled out. But that said, looking back on these first couple Voodoo books, I would definitely recommend them. You know, Nug and Cymek were not wrong. These books actually were a highlight, especially over the first 6 months when Nug and Cymek were extremely active on their channel, reviewing every single book month to month. So that about wraps me up for this Monday video. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit off the beaten path, but you guys know me, that's kind of my MO, especially lately. So thanks for joining me on the ride, and go give Nug and Cymek a watch. You know, it's a fun little trip down memory lane. Even if you weren't active in the community at the time, it's a fun window into, you know, the old YouTube community that I think is worth a second look if you've never checked it out before. If you've never checked out Voodoo, it's definitely worth giving a chance to. It's just fun popcorn entertainment, really. With that, I'm out. I hope you guys have a great week in comics, and thanks for watching this video. Take care.